Okay, so where were we? We were talking about DNS, right? Let me just share it. Okay, so we're talking about DNS. I mean, if we want to configure, no, we were talking about CDRs. Okay, so we were talking about partial CDR. The partial CDR generation is usually done when a CDR is for a longer duration of time, and sometimes you need to break it up into multiple CDR. So partial CDR is generated for the same PDB session, and it can be generated based on different scenarios. If it reaches a specific traffic threshold, if it reaches a time threshold, if there is a RAT change, if there is any charging condition change, or if we are forcefully forced to generate a partial CDR using the operation and maintenance. Okay, so as CDR generation scenarios, CDR generation, I mean, is based on creation is based on PDP, and CDR release scenarios, normal session termination. If there is an inter SGSN routing area handover, or if there is abnormal session termination, this will result in release of the CDR. If this is not done, then you'll keep on having partial CDR based on the configuration you have. Okay, so partial CDR generation, data volume limited. It's based on time limitation, based on your RAT change, based on your tariff change, already discussed in maintenance intervention. And your release cost is normal release. If you have an SGSN change, when SGSN obviously you move from one is to other one, so your CDR needs to be closed and new CDR needs to be opened. And if there is an abnormal release. These are different format of the CDRs. You have R98 for GPRS, 99 for GPRS, UMTS. So all the different CDR formats are those that are recognized by your billing system. These are usually standard ones, and these can be discussed upon based on what your billing system supports. So with respect to charging, there are three types of user. One is a home user, one we call a visiting user, one we call a roaming user. So the difference between these three is a home user is a user that is, for example, this is MNC and MCC. So home user is a user who is using his own SGSN, using his own EGSN. A visiting user is a separate, a different network user that is using your SGSN and your EGSN. If we have national roaming implemented in national roaming, what happens is that you use the other operator SGSN in order uh, SGSN, and then accordingly their EGSN as well in order to use data services if your own network is not providing services in that area. And roaming user is a user that is coming from another country, and usually in that case your own SGSN is used, but the roaming user uses his own network GGSN as well, by communicating through your border gateway, your IPX and all that, and it reaches its own GGSN. So we have three different configuration for the CDRs based on which type of user this is. Okay, there are four different charging characteristics. But this is specific to Huawei, maybe some other characteristics as well. A normal user is charged on a periodic basis. A hot billing is charged right after the conversion. A flat rate is charged based on a flat rate. On a monthly basis, the charges are fixed, and a prepaid user is one that is uses a service before pays before and then afterward is uses service. And five different charge selection modes. These three parts we already discussed: home default, visiting default, and roaming default. And then these two are APN specific and subscription specific. So your charging type in the APN charge supplied by the HLR. This is something if you have a specific APN contact that is specified in the HLR, so your charging can be done specific to your APN. And then it can be based on a specific subscription. If you have done a specific charge subscription in your HLR profile, then your charging can be done based on that specific subscription. But usually it is these three. Okay, so configuration. For this is you add an IP address, interface IP address, a static route. Usually it's optional. Then you have the service IP address for GA, the local one. Then you add the CDP IP, and then you had the charging gateway information. And then your charging rule information, your charging basic charging information. You have your GA interface attributes. You have your charging CDR attributes, and then you have different attributes for generating of a CDR. And lastly, you can configure priority of a charging gateway for multiple charging gateways as well. These are some optional things that are used if you need to set different charging based on weekdays, holidays, and all that. And how to confirm your configuration, that is done by display your charging file on your CG information. Okay. Okay, so this is an example. You have your service processing unit, and then you have your IPU. And in your IPU, it is given an example. So IPU has this IP address, your router's IP address is given, and your charging gateway IP addresses are provided here. Okay. So first one is to add a service IP address. So your service IP address is going to be the local IP address, which will communicating with the charging gateway. And then you define a charging CDP IP address. So it will be defining the port number and the IP address of the CDP process. So here the IP address given is already provided by your planning team. And this is the IP address specifically, which is 70.2. Okay, so this 70.2 is this IP address. And this is your begin port, and this is your end port. So you need to specify the port along with the IP address. You need to specify the port as well. Usually your service IP address in the CHG CDP IP address is the same. Sometimes it can be different, but usually the service IP address and the charging CDP process IP address is the same. Then your interface IP address, you have to specify an interface name, which is a G interface, and then you have to specify the IP address. We specify the same IP address. That is for the port that's connecting your IPU to your charging gateway. Then you specify a static route. This is optional, and this static route is being defined for all the three charging gateways. So you specify a prefix, specify a mask link, and then you specify the next hop IP address as well. And next hop IP address is the IP address of the router, which we have specified here. Okay. Next is to configure the IP address of your charging gateway. Okay, because you uniquely set the IP address, port number, and priority of a charging gateway. So this is the command. Your requirement is this. The IP address is this. Priority should be set to 0. The GTP protocol is UDP. Release is 84, and the port is 3386. So this is the command that is used for defining configuring a charging gateway, where GRD is the priority of the CG protocol, and this is the port number on which you are going to communicate with your charging gateway. CHG GA is basically used to configure your GPRS release, different CDR release, and which version of the CDR is going to be supported. Okay, so this is for your G interface attribute. CHG GA is the setting of CD take after SVP and GTP. So this is basically if you modify this configuration during your live operation, so it is going to take effect after your processes have been restarted. So you can restart your SVP and GTP processes. If you don't restart this, then these changes are not going to take effect. CHG CDR is used to set the CDR parameters such as the SGSN node ID and the home default. For example, you need to carry IMEI, MSISD, and a location information, LAC and RAC information in your SCDR. So this is how you're going to specify that. Okay, in your SCDR, SL is specifying the SCDR information. So your SCDR needs to contain what? It should contain your IMEI is 1, your MSISD and 1, LAC is 1, RAC is 1, node is 1, and node ID is 1. So SL means SCDR list. So if you need to add some more field in your SCDR or remove some fields in SCDR, you can do it using this set CHG CDR command. And these are the list of different fields that can be added in your SCDR. So depending on your billing side requirement, you can add or delete any of these using this command, the set chg CDR. Okay, you have your IMEI, SGSN address, network capability, LAC, RAC, APN. Okay, and cell PLMN ID. So these are all these supported fields. Okay, next is the charging characteristics. Okay, so your charging characteristic, basically this is based on the priority. So how your priority of a user using a charging characteristic use. So going from higher priority to a low priority, your charging characteristics is subscribed with an HLR. It takes the higher priority. If nothing is specified there, then your charging characteristics which are configured in your APN, it has the priority. If this is also not specified, then your charging characteristic for non-home users or specified PLMN using set CHG DCR, that takes priority. And even if this is not configured, then your charging characteristics which are configured using set CHG CDR command, those characteristics take effect. So it's downward priority, highest being from HLR and lowest being what is configured on your SGSN. Okay, next is the CHG APN. This command is used to configure the charging configuration of the APN, basically to specify that which sort of charging is going to be done on your APN. For example, set the charging type of subscribers of APN to prepaid. So you can specify that which sort of charging characteristic will be done by the APN. This CC is this same one which we saw earlier. This one can be normal, hot billing, flat rate, and prepaid. So this is something that you can specify in an APN over here. Next is your charging PLMN characteristic. This command is used to control the CDRs generated for local network and other network subscribed. Okay, if it is set to no, in that case, no other configuration takes place. Okay, so for example, this is an example where we specify that if we need to generate an SCDR, we don't need to generate MCDR. We don't need to generate the SMS CDR and all that. So this is the basic, the first command that needs to be specified, indicating that what sort of CDRs do we require. So for home PLMN, we require SCDRs and we do not require any other CDR. So even if we specify that MCDR is no, and then we start doing configuration of MCDRs, the MCDR is not going to be generated because this command has the highest priority. So here, this is a basic command where you specify the which CDRs need to be generated. Next is your CDR generation policy. This is to specify basically for a specific CDR what sort of attributes of the CDR needs to be done. For example, we need to specify that okay, we are generating an MCDR. Okay, so in MCDR, what is going to be the different attributes of this? So as an example, we have this command where set CG thread where the charging will be normal. MPS means that MCDR is going to be created. Then MPCP is basically whether it will generate partial CDRs or not. So we have specified to yes that okay, this CDR can generate partial CDR as well. Then we can specify the partial CDR timer as well. Okay, that after every 15 minutes, if the CDR is not closed, it will close the partial CDR and will generate a new partial CDR. Then MLCP is generate location change partial CDR. This specifies that okay, if location of a user changes, your routing area update changes, whether it will trigger generation of a local of a partial CDR or not. So in that case, it is specified as no. And if it is generated, if it's specified as yes, then you can specify that okay, after how many changes location should a partial CDR be generated. So maximum number of location changes for partial CDR is specified is 3. So if this is set to yes and this is set to C, then after 3 location changes, your partial CDR and a new partial CDR is going to be generated. I have this for SCDR as well, because that will be here. Okay. So here, this is going to be more understandable because usually we are using SCDR as well. So as an example, we need to generate an SCDR for an IMSI prefix 46003 and the period is the time limit for the CDR is 60 minutes. Okay, the volume for the CDR is 100 KB, and charging condition is no. Your location change triggers the CDR is set to no and makes the number of condition changes 3. Okay, so this will be the command CAGCR. Here SPS mean that generate an SCDR, and SPP permit allow time-based partial CDRs. Okay, time-based CDRs are partial CDRs are allowed. Then what is the time limit for periodic CDR? It is 60 minutes. What is the volume? SVP yes means that allow volume triggered partial CDR. Based on your volume condition, partial CDR is triggered or not. That is yes. Then you specify after which volume a partial CDR is going to be triggered. That is 100 KB. And then you specify whether quality of service or tariff change is going to generate a CDR or not. So you specify it as no. And then you specify whether a partial location change will trigger a CDR generation. So that's all specified to be no. Okay, so coming back to this one, this is covered already. Okay, then there are two commands used to set this SCDR generation policy. One is the charging INSI configuration and the charging characteristic. This command is used to SCDR generation policy based on INSI prefix. So if you need to generate a CDR based on INSI prefix, use this command. And if you need to generate a CDR based on charging characteristics, it will be charging characteristic. The priority of SCDR generation policy configured by running the first command is higher than that. So this will have higher priority than this command. Okay, so now this is an example of when you're using based on your IMSI prefix. So you specify an IMSI prefix, you specify CDR needs to be created, SPP permit, SPL60 and all that. So the configuration method of SCG by setting is similar to that of changing IMSI configuration. So this is a command for specified IMSI, and this is a command that is for overall generic SCDR generation. So its parameters are more or less the same, with the difference that this is for IMSI prefix and this is for your overall subscriber base. Now, the next one is configuring the CG selection priority. So CG selection, what is going to be the priority, okay, of CGs being selected. So the first one is your charging behavior. If your CG priority is mentioned here, then this priority is going to have the higher precedence. If it is not configured here, then your charging characteristic command. If it's not mentioned here, then your PLMN CG command. And if even it's not configured here, then the least priority is that of add CG, where you specify the IP address of the charging gateway and you specify its priority. The CG with the highest priority is selected first. Okay, the priority is assigned only in CG. The rest of the command follow the IP address. Okay, so here only the IP address is going to be mentioned. The priority specified is going to be selected here. Okay, so here this is an example of CHGP11 CG. Here you can see that only one IP address is specified here. You don't have a priority mentioned here. So if this command is configured, then this based on this MNC and MCC, all your CDRs are going to go to this charging gateway IP address, irrespective of what is configured in this command. To configure the behavioral characteristics, the command is this one: add CHG BEHA. Okay, CB is your charging behavior, and a specific ID for your charging behavior is specified here. Okay, and behavior attribute is CG IP, and then you specify that which charging IP is going to be handling all the CDRs based on this charging behavior characteristic, and then you're going to specify that what sort of charging characteristics are specified. Hot billing is 1, the rest are 0. So all your charging is going to be done based on hot billing characteristics. Okay, step 10 to 15 is for your special tariffs, where you can specify a specific tariff for holiday, for weekend, for specific timings and all that. So it gives an example of that. For example, if you need to specify a holiday, you can specify the month and day, and you can specify that okay, on this month and day and year, what sort of charging needs to be done, and normal charging needs to be done. Okay, and if you need to specify a tariff type, which sort of charging character is going to be done on your weekday and weekends. So you can specify that okay, the CC type is going to be normal for weekend, and it is going to be normal for work as well. And you can modify it based on your requirement. You can set it to flat rate, hot billing, or anything like that. Hassan, all of these configuration are for CG, and all of these are commands for Huawei. So you need to check which configuration you have done, whether behavior characteristics is done, whether the charging priority is done. Usually the command that we use for checking your configuration is this command, the CHG. Usually all of these are specified from specific. So mainly it's CHG command is the one that is used to display and check the IP address and its priority. Weekdays, you can specify the tariff for specific time duration as well. Start time is 10 and end time is 8. Okay, then you can specify the Ring, the restriction of this service as well. And this is usually done when your service, when your hard disk capacity is full. Okay, so if your hard disk capacity is full, of the CG is full, then what is it that you're going to do with respect to whether to allow the service to continue as it is, whether to prohibit the service, or whether to prohibit the new service, the new users for using the services as well. Okay, the system can specify whether to continue the data service when the cache is insufficient. Generally, the hard disk is full and G interface communication is interrupted. Okay, so if your communication is interrupted, you have three options available. You can allow unrestricted services. Services can continue as it is. You can specify to prohibit the active PDP and SMS. So here, what's going to happen is your existing services will continue. Your new services will not be allowed to be created, and your CDRs are going to be lost. And last one is your interrupt service. In that case, all of your services are going to go down. So this is the command send charging characteristics. The charging characteristics is normal, and then you specify that okay, which sort of service do I need to do in case there is the hard disk is full. So here is mentioned understood. So it will continue to serve all the users, and then your CDRs are locally cached inside your SGSN, and once that database gets full, in that case, then you will have the CDR lost as well. Okay, this is for system provide multiple charging behavior for deactivating the idle PDP and specifying the CG. This configuration is optional again and optional. So PDP purge timer is sent to 3. The behavior attribute is going to be using this command. So once your 30 minutes have exceeded, then your PDP gets purged and your CDR gets closed. So you can specify it over here using charging preferences. And then is the last one where we mentioned that the CDR can be released based on your operation and maintenance as well. So if we need to forcibly generate a CDR, forcibly close a CDR in order to ensure the new CDR gets created. So this is the command for that. Create charging CDR, and CDR type is SC. So in order to ensure that all partial CDRs are closed, so we can use this command to forcibly generate a CDR. This is usually done during the ATP time. So during ATP, once you have created a CDR and you need to close the CDR, so it runs through the charging gateway, you can use this command for that. And you have the option of ensuring this forcible CDR generation on a time as well. For example, you need all your CDRs to be closed before 12, so you can specify a time by which all your CDRs are going to be closed forcibly. So you can specify the time here, you can specify the type of the CDR as well to be forcibly closed. Right. So in order to check your CG is working fine or not, or the configuration of the CG is specifically done using display CG. So using this command, it will give you that, okay, this is the IP address and this is the port, and whether its communication is normal or not. So this way you can identify the status of your charging gateway. Okay. And the other one is to query whether any local CDRs are being saved. So CSG file usually gives you an output, and you can see whether if your communication is abnormal with your charging gateway, your SGSN is going to start saving the CDRs in your hard disk or SPU. So those lists of CDRs can be checked using this CSV file. Okay, so we have covered GNGP, we have covered GA. Apologies, I mentioned at the start, we have already covered GR and we covered GB and IU as well. So these are the basic interfaces configuration that needs to be done on SGSN side. The rest is with respect to MME side, and that I think we will cover in next session because it's already late and I took a lot of time. So we'll conclude the studying session here, and from next time we are going to start the configurations that for MME side as well, with regard to your S1 MME, S6A, and other S11, S5, S8 configuration is going to be done there. Okay. Thank you for your time. Take care, everyone. See you next week, inshallah. Allah Hafiz.